So when we decided we were going to bring that figure back, we really challenged ourselves to say, can we bring that same impact to people? Can we bring that same sense of humanity to the figure, to the robotic figure, the audio-electronic, and have that satisfy today's audience, which is much more discriminating, much more sophisticated than I think audiences were at the time. We've all seen amazing things in CG and using other technologies today that weren't even really conceived in the early 60s. So today's audience has really come at it with a different set of expectations. So meeting that audience expectations today really required us to push the limit on what we could do. That drove us to all electronics versus our tried and true hydraulics technology. And that allowed us to do things like much more subtle motions. We all have almost inside the head, we have almost 3 times as many what we call functions or things that move inside the head than the original ones. And an all new skin system that allows using a different chemistry in the skin to make it more flexible, pliable, stretch and squash so that it feels like you can see and sense the muscles moving and the lips pursing and swallowing at those moments when that classic performance kind of really dictates. So being able to bring that sense of humanity and subtlety to the man, to this historic figure, is something that we really challenged ourselves to do.
And they did. I think another thing that, as we realized that it was going to be an exercise in subtlety rather than broad gestures. If we do performing bear or dash, you can get away with a lot because nobody really knows how characters like that really move. But with
you and I do.
Yeah, we do. But a dignified character like the president becomes a real exercise in subtlety. So we had to look for other things, and this drove us to re-examine all the recording sessions that had been done, and we uncovered takes that really had a lot more fidelity than the tapes that were used in the original show. And there was a reason for that. The original show was recorded with a boom mic with Royal Dano actually kind of miming and performing the show. Royal was the actor that chose for the part. Then they went into a recording studio and did numerous takes with high quality equipment, even for today's standards. The analog tracks that we found were extraordinary and clear enough that you get not just greater diction, but all of these little pauses that we do as humans when we talk, running out of breath, smacking your lips, all of that. And those are the things that now, with the subtleties that we've got with this figure, I think you'll find those are the moments where he really comes to life, when you see him pausing between segments. And all that had been lost and buried in the recordings that you've heard before, and we were able to really bring that to light. And I think it was kind of an interesting exercise finding the connections to Royal Dano. His young grandson, Hutch Dano, is now a performer on the Disney television networks, and he came into us and was finding out what are we doing, and what was this about his grandfather that Walt liked. And so it led us down to Beverly Hills, where the Paley Television Museum is housed, and they have numerous volumes of things that are long since, you'd think have turned to dust, but they've preserved them. And it turns out that back in 1952, Royal Dano performed a series of episodes on a television show called Omnibus, in which he depicted Lincoln in various stages of his life. He was only 32 at the time when he did it, but when you look at these films, you can see him age through to the years just of his assassination. Well, the Paley Center was really nice to allow us to use about a minute of that, which you won't see it's running in this as a part of the pre-show, but when we studied the reactions to that film and the acclaim that it got from the critics, it was apparent that it really, burned into Walt's mind that someday, and this was 52 and Lincoln opened at the New York World's Fair in 64, it stuck there. And late in the 50s, Walt Disney developed this idea for One Nation Under God. And if you look at some of the early park maps, you'll see an area called Liberty square in which this pavilion was to be. And he dreamed of a place where he could bring all the presidents to life. Unfortunately, the technology didn't exist, but they did some preliminary recordings of Royal Dano for that show. And one of those recordings made it to the final cut of what you'll hear today. And it was the hardest one in terms of cleaning it up technologically, because it was a decade before the rest of it. But our guys up in Imaginary, I think, worked some miracles with that. I think it'll be very hard for you to tell which line of dialogue in there is from like the very late 50s, early 60s, predated Great Moments of Mr. Lincoln and predated everything. So it's been an interesting journey. I think one that I feel very passionate about, bringing back Royal's voice. And when you see his live performance in this old black and white video, you'll be shocked at how much he looks like Lincoln. And I think that was what really, inspired Wall. Was here was this guy that had the physical presence of the president, and clearly the kind of Midwestern humble mannerisms that would go with that. And so we're very pleased we were able to find these new tracks that give us today's level of sophistication, but at the same time this classic performance. And likewise, of course, the Disney stalwart Paul Frees, who narrates the show, we were able to likewise clean his tracks up. And in so doing, we found a line of dialogue that, for those of you who know everything that's ever been published on every CD and whatnot, there is a line of dialogue that you've never heard before by Paul Frees in this show. Walt had originally decided that he would do a holiday show for Flag Day and 4th of July and Memorial Day. And when you realize how, even today, how complicated it is to perform the programming of this show, you'd realize that you don't just go in there and change it for one day and then go back to the regular show. So that show was buried for years and years and years. We were able to bring a line from an unheard of performance into today's performance. So kind of a fun journey. It's been like about 18 months, and I think we're very pleased with
We're almost done.
We're almost done.
Completely done.
You're going to see some consoles in there because we are still tweaking the performance. Even though we plan to open tomorrow, we're still, in fact, if you listen carefully while we were holding you, we were doing one more test before we let you in there.
Yeah.
So
One of the things when you introduce these new sophisticated technologies, you also introduce lots of
surprises,
lots of troubleshooting, and lots of making and some surprise. So we are, these folks have been working the last few nights and days, pretty much nonstop, trying to tweak that in. And we're not quite done yet.
Well, he surprises us. Like we have a great gesture where he says a tracker clock across the Blue Ridge, and that looks great and everything. But what it was doing inside was not comfortable, so we ended up having to do some adjustments on that. But you never know. You just never know. So
So we're getting a little bit of a sneak peek.
And what's really neat about that whole process, this is where Walt Disney started the whole evolution of human audiometronics. And you're here today as we're about to introduce the first time there's really been a major shift in how audiometronics is done. And our goal is we're going to be babysitting him for the next 6 months and finding out how this goes, because if it works as we are sure it will as we get through all of this, it's going to be the dawn of taking this art form in a very much more limitless direction. If you look at, I think the most sophisticated of the traditional that we've done was Obama, that opened last summer in the Hall of Presidents. And he is at the top of the old traditional way of doing business. Now, Lincoln is the start of a new era.
It's really a reinvented process. Starting from a new sculpt and a new way of doing the skins, the way of figure pitching the skins, the way the hair is applied, the way the skin and the freckles, all that stuff is realized. It's a whole new process, really, from the ground up.
Yeah, he's got stuff.
He does have stuff.